$3,500. That was about as much as I would clear in a month working at the agency. So with that, I basically said, okay, I got this $3,500. That buys me 1 month, and I need to go out and sell some other projects in order to pay my rent and electric bill and grocery bill and all that kind of stuff. So I basically started selling as soon as I started my first week as a freelancer working out of my basement. I started sending emails around, asking people if they needed some design work or if they, knew anybody who did, went to a couple local events. And it was pretty crazy. Within that first month, I had enough clients. I never had to really go out and sell again as a freelancer. It all kind of came organically to me. So it turned out to be a bit easier than I had imagined. And that was just me beginning my career as a freelancer.
Right. It's sort of a combination, as it always is, of skill and luck. You certainly had the luck to be able to make those contacts and get success early, but it came because you had a certain skill set that you've honed over the years.
And I want to make a point there for anybody listening who's thinking of going out on their own, is that I've seen too often, for example, and I'm sure there's many examples, but one is somebody goes to school to take graphic design or web design, and then immediately out of school they're like, I just want to be a freelancer, and I don't want to work for anybody. And I think that's a huge mistake. I think that when you're trying to get good at a craft, whether that's design, programming, cooking, you should always train under some masters first for a little while. Even if eventually you want to be an entrepreneur and you want to run your own show, just study under somebody much better and much more experienced than you. Because it does a few things. It makes you better at your craft, but then it also gives you the experience. So like me working in a design agency fresh out of school gave me the contacts, the people that I worked with, who then introduced me to people they knew. Just seeing how the business is run, like looking at my boss and going like, how do they bring clients in the door? Like where do they find these leads? And how, like, I was always fascinated with that whole process, which probably makes sense for what I'm doing now, which is basically helping agencies sell. But yeah, I was always fascinated by the business side of that, I guess. So, just going out and working in a few different places and getting your feet wet, I think is very, very advisable before you go out on your own, because then you have those contacts.
Right. Absolutely. And it's funny. Like I know that your company, has dealt with, you deal with all different manners of clients from the very big to much smaller. Friend of the show, Mike Tanner, I know he uses Proposify.
Oh yeah. Mike. Yep.
So like, it's really cool. I've always been really sort of proud to know that a company like Proposify, that is sort of a global leader in a lot of ways, exists here in my backyard.
Yeah. I think growing up in Nova Scotia, I think we all have at least a little bit of a complex around, we're not good enough, or, not a lot of famous people come from here. Not a lot of big, huge, successful companies come from here. I certainly grew up with that mentality. So, yeah, I've been able to, I guess, fight that over the years, because really once you get out and you travel and you spend some time in bigger cities, you kind of realize that we're all the same, and there's just as much opportunity here as there is elsewhere. Sometimes you have to hop on a plane, but you can run a world-class business from anywhere.
Awesome. So just changing gears here just a little bit. One of the first things that you and I connected over was music. I know you're a big music fan. I've seen you dabbling in some vinyl as well. What are you listening to? What gets you excited with music these days?
There's a lot. I have recently got into vinyl. Got my first record player back just 6 months ago or so as a birthday present. I've always actually, the reason why I really get into that, I'd love to think that it's you can hear the sound, you can hear the wider range of frequency. Like, I don't know, I'm not that much of at least I believe I'm not that much of a hipster snob yet, but What I do enjoy about buying vinyl is really just supporting artists. I know they don't make a lot from Spotify and from streaming services, so it's just kind of like if I check out a band on Spotify, I really like them, then I'll generally look for their vinyl as a way to just kind of like, contribute to them, I suppose. But as far as the kinds of music, recently have gotten into Mogwai. They're, Scottish band that's been around for a long time. Their latest album's fantastic. Really like a UK band called Wolf Alice, with a wonderful singer. Really kind of almost 90s grunge mixed with like kind of newer styles.
That sounds right up my alley.
Yeah. There's a performance for a song called Sad Boy, which I advise people to check out. They performed on, I think it was Stephen Colbert. Interesting, like sends chills, the performance.
That's up on YouTube?
Yeah.
Cool. I'll make sure to link that in the show notes, because I'm always looking for the next big piece of music to sort of. I know, like personally, I've been listening to a lot more podcasts lately, but like I always do look for that piece of music, particularly if I'm like working on something for school. I can't really listen to podcasts because I'm more drawn into, okay, what are they talking about? But music can, move you to a certain headspace to help you perform better, I guess.
It gets into your subconscious, doesn't it? Because when you're listening to talking, you're really focused on the content. It's really right in the forefront of your mind. That's why I actually can't listen to rap and do any sort of writing work, because the words are getting mixed in. But, music just sort of just hangs around you. It doesn't actually jump right. You know what I mean? It doesn't take over what you're doing.
Yeah, unless you let it, unless that's what you want it to do. Like for me, I don't listen to a whole great deal of vinyl just because I don't have my own record player. My roommate does, and I'll listen to some of his albums from time to time. Like that's what I like about vinyl, is I find that that's like an active listening experience. You're sitting there to listen to an album, whereas with Spotify or any of the other streaming services, it's more like okay, I'm going to listen to a song. Like it's not as much of an event as listening to an entire album. And that's the active listening and the active experiencing of music, at least that you can get like in your own home. Of course, going to a show is a whole different beast. Or going to karaoke, which you and I are going to have to do again soon.
I was just talking about that at lunch with some people about it's been a long time. I've gotten more into doing open mics where you get to play guitar and stuff like that. I've been doing that semi-regularly for a couple of years down at Celtic Corner, but I'm always up for some karaoke. Or as Kevin, my business partner, calls it, carry choke me.
Oh my goodness. So let's get into some plugs for you here. I know that you host a podcast, the Proposify Biz Chat. What's that all about? What can people expect if they listen to that?
Yeah, I mean, we started that podcast in 2015, so we've been doing it about 3 years now. It started because basically I was putting out a lot of blogging content around helping agencies with, selling and running better and more efficiently and all that kind of stuff. But I found that as I was doing it, I was kind of running out of fresh material because I actually hadn't run an agency, for a little while. So it was around that time that I was like, what if I just interviewed other agency owners and talked about how they're running their business and challenges they're overcoming and all that kind of stuff. And so that started as a podcast called Agencies Drinking Beer, where every Friday we'd sit down, we'd interview an agency owner somewhere in the world, and regardless of what time zone they're in, they'd always crack open a beer. And we did that for quite a while. And then we sort of, around this time last year, changed the name of it and started getting a little bit more buttoned down with it and not always needing it to be an interview. Sometimes it's just me, sometimes it's somebody in the office with me, or sometimes it's, an interview. So that's the Proposify Biz Chat. We're talking to a lot of SaaS owners, mostly around digital marketing, sales, sometimes product stuff. So yeah, that's kind of what the show's about. There's couple hundred episodes now if you combine that with Agencies Drinking Beer, so people can find that on iTunes.
Awesome. And how about you? Where can we find you on the web?
I'm everywhere. you can go to my website's kyleracki.com. Pretty easy to remember if you can remember the last name. Pardon me. I'm doing a lot of blogging. You know why? I've been like belching a lot today, and it's Becky, somebody who works here, was in. She was like laughing because she was taking these tests. She was testing the sound in the video, and like in every test shot she took of me, I was belching. And I was like, it's because of my heartburn. I've been taking baking soda. A spoonful of baking soda works instantly, but you burp for about 10 minutes.
Oh, wow.
So there you go. Quick little home remedy for heartburn. If you have it, a teaspoon of baking soda and some water. Tastes awful, but it works. So I blog on Medium, so they can just go to my website for that. I'm working on a book right now about kind of my background, being raised in a cult and leaving it and overcoming some personal challenges while I was getting my business off the ground. So that's what I'm working on.
Cool stuff. And of course, the website for your company, proposify.com. Kyle, thank you so much for being on the show. And I always like to end on one sort of big question that's, I try and think it's profound, but it's probably not. If you had one item on a bucket list that you could knock off and that was going to be it, what would it be?
I would love to direct a movie someday.
Nice. Like any particular genre or?
Yeah, well, I haven't really thought about genre too much, but I haven't done it in a long time, but maybe about 5 years ago, I got into it for 3 months. I read a couple books on screenplay writing, and then I wrote a few. I think I've only actually finished one, but it's just always been a passion of mine. I study directors, and I love watching YouTube videos that really go in depth on like film theory. One of my favorite YouTube channels is called Cinefix. And man, if you watch every video on that channel, you've basically went to film school. The way they analyze movies over, international films to Hollywood films to, silent era to stuff that came out last year. Like they just go into all of it. Anyway, it's a passion of mine, and I think I'm probably decades away from being able to do it, but yeah, bucket list item is to direct a feature-length film.
Awesome. Well, that's really great. So again, Kyle, thank you so much for being on the show. I know you're a busy guy. I really appreciate you taking the time. It's always an absolute pleasure when we get to chat.
Yeah, no, my pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
No problem. And say hi to Lindsay Ward for me, okay?
Oh, I will do. She's amazing.
Good old friend.
Anyway.
Great, thanks. And sort of back in the studio here, thank you again so much, Kyle, for being on the show. I already made plans, mentally checked you off on a future guest for return. Maybe when you get that book thing on the go, we'll have you on to chat about it. Next up, a good old friend of mine from across the pond, Mitchell Summers Hall, on the show, and we're going to talk about football, particularly his beloved Leicester City Football Club. So here's Mitchell.
We're here now.
We are here now, and I think everything is good to go. So you are officially the first non-Canadian guest that I'm having on the show. I realized this the other day. You're the first person who's never lived in Halifax, and the first non-Canadian on the show. How do you feel about that?
I feel like we're doing wonders for English-Canadian relations, just this alone.
Well, I mean, I think that the English need all the friends they can get after. You guys are less than a year away from Brexit now.
Oh, don't. That's not even. I've tried to do my best to sweep that under the rug and pretend that it's not happening. But yeah, we're gonna have to face the consequences soon, I think.
Oh my God! Well, that entire year, as a Canadian, which we're we're the little brothers of history. That's who we are. I'm sitting here watching the United States self-destruct, the United Kingdom self-destruct, all at once. It was a really, really strange thing to just I think the best way that it was described was your mom's gone off her pills, and your brother is rebelling in the worst possible way all at once, and meanwhile you're just trying to not die.
Yeah, it's almost like you're torn between sort of wanting to look really, really smug and just sort of sitting there with a big bag of popcorn and just watching it all, just like you say, self-destruct.
Oh, well, I mean, we're doing the smug thing. Don't get me wrong.